Hello, I'm Jim Kelly, the founder of Saddle Point Systems with Melanie, my wife. I wasn't making enough money because we were not paying ourselves well as teachers. So I was already working with Tom in the city at Business Products and Supplies Company. One day, Tom was signing a check to Xerox for some binding strips, which is just a piece of paper with some glue on it. And it was like $500 he was paying them. And he had trouble with that because he had worked for Xerox before he started this business. And he said, "Dick, don't you know anybody who could make this thing? And we could sell it against Xerox?" And I said, "Well, I have one kid in class who's a bookbinder, and I'll take it to him and ask him." And so I showed it to Kevin. He didn't know what it was, but he immediately went to work on making a machine to make the strip. And quite surprisingly, we were selling it nationwide within, I would say, 6 months. He had built a machine and figured it all out entirely by himself, how to do it. And I'm sure no engineer would have done it the way he did it, because he did it on the cheap. So Kevin Parker's mother was Catherine Brown, and she ran Crown Point Press in San Francisco. And Kevin did hand-sewn bindings for Claus Oldenburg, John Cage, a lot of the artists at the time that were at Crown Point Press. And so Kevin was a bookbinder. And I showed the strip to Kevin, and he says, "What is it?" I said, "Well, it's a bookbinding strip." And of course, he didn't bind books that way at all. And so he said he'd see what he could do. So he started building in his basement a strip making machine. And it was longer than this room, about 40, 50 feet long, big, long basement. And he made it out of washing machine motors to drive it, coffee urns to melt the glue. It was a Rube Goldberg thing. Very fine Italian papers that he laid the glue down on. John Cage was living at Kevin's house at the time, and I got to meet John. And John was down there every afternoon watching Kevin build this thing, because he made it from no money. The only money required to build the machine was the glue head, and that was $2,000 part. And I went with Kevin to the glue head manufacturer, and Kevin wanted to look at it carefully before he paid $2,000 for this glue head. And Kevin said, "What's in it?" And the sales guy says, "Well, I don't know what's in it, but I know it works very well." And Kevin says, "Well, I just can't pay $2,000 without seeing what's in it." "Well, it's glued shut because it's been used." And so they got out a blowtorch and heated it up and opened it up, and there was nothing inside. It's just a gap. So Kevin went home that night and built one for 50 cents worth of scrap metal, and he had his glue machine. And it was made on a web that's about that wide, that was running at high speed and the glue being deposited. And then it would run a long distance under fans, cooling it down. And then you had to slit it, and you had to chop it to the exact length, and that was very important. And he started producing strip that was better than Xerox's by far, much prettier, much better paper. And we started selling it nationwide. I'd call different companies across the country and that were marketing the Xerox strip and said, that we got a better strip for you. Xerox flew in and sued us, and there were a lot of things going on. But Xerox agreed that Kevin had a patent on his strip that they couldn't break. Kevin realized there weren't enough Xerox machines out there to support the number of strips he can make. So he started developing a binding machine. So he employed a lot of the other Maybeck students to come in the afternoons and help him with it. And some of those students were very good mechanically and electronically and computer-wise. And Kevin wasn't so good electronically or computer-wise, so he was able to use their talents, and that's how they got to the machine, and they made a very, very good machine, and then they made a second version of it that was even better. Yeah. So they took the binding market away from Velobind, Xerox. There were a lot of companies in it back then, and Kevin had a lion's share of the market worldwide. The way that worked is we'd always set up a demo. So Melanie would call Copy Central and say, we want to bring this machine in and show you. Because you really had to see it, and once you saw it, you bought it. I mean, it was just that good. So we'd set up demos and just take it in and show them. And then it got to be known that we sold it to the whole Kinko's chain, and that was nationwide. So people in those cities started to find out about it. And Kevin improved it and went from the Model 20 to the Model 15 to the Model 20, which was better, stronger bind, faster. And then he also made a machine that printed on the spines, and then he made a foil printing machine for covers. The advantage of Kevin's binding machine at Saddle Point Systems that we sell, we're one of the distributors, is that it's a very automatic machine. Most binding machines that bind paper together punch holes in the paper or use staples or that kind of thing. This was a glue system, and it allows the pages to go flat and yet hold in very strong. So that's the main advantage, along with being a very quick way to bind a book. I'd take one sheet of paper and very carefully bounce the book by the one sheet of paper, and it held the whole weight of the book. You had to be a little careful not to bounce it too hard or it'd tear the paper, but that also was a testimonial to how strong the bind was. Saddle Point Systems, an unusual name. When we started the business, we didn't know whether Kevin would have a binding machine or not. He was working on it, but he may not ever get it. And if he didn't, we might turn Saddle Point into something else, because we were also working on another project with another student, Fred Valuna, called a digital signal processing board. So we called it Saddle Point Systems because that's a saddle point is a min-max surface. Like a saddle, it's minimum this way and maximum that way. And that was, I thought, a cute name. And that way we could sell anything we wanted. And people say, you know, you wouldn't want to call it Business Products and Supplies Company. I quit the business that I was at to market the binding machine that Kevin and a few of the other Maybeck students, the ones with the electronic capabilities, the one with the computer capabilities, and Kevin with the mechanical capabilities, they started Powis Parker company that made the machine, and we sold the machine. And that's where Saddle Point Systems came from.